$356 million. Tasha read the numbers twice before her coffee pot trembled. Billionaire Harrison Montgomery immediately dismissed the black waitress with a wave. Just another poor server begging for tips. But when she whispered, line 47, your depreciation calculation is wrong. You're using straight line instead of accelerated depreciation, his face went white as paper. Harrison's thoughts raced. How could I have missed it? Now he was staring at her like she'd just walked on water. What happened next was so shocking it reached the highest levels of corporate America. Not all heroes get happy endings after all. Welcome back to Eva's Stories. I have missed you all so much. Thank you for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. At 5:30 a.m., the alarm screamed, cutting through Tasha Bennett's dream like a blade. She'd been walking across a stage, diploma in hand, while her mother cheered from the audience. Reality hit harder than the cold air seeping through her apartment's cracked window. Another day in paradise, she whispered, feet hitting the worn carpet of her studio apartment in Dorchester. Tasha moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Shower with lukewarm water because the landlord still hadn't fixed the boiler. Coffee made from yesterday's grounds because grocery money was tight until Friday's paycheck. She pulled on her uniform, black slacks that had seen better days and a white button-down she'd ironed last night while watching job interview videos on YouTube. Her reflection stared back from the bathroom mirror. 28 years old, with rich brown skin that glowed despite exhaustion, and natural hair pulled into a neat low bun. Her mother always said she had eyes that could see through walls. Today, those eyes looked tired. The framed accounting degree on her nightstand caught the morning light. Boston University, magna cum laude, 2019. 4 years later, it might as well have been wallpaper. She'd sent out 237 resumes in the past year. The responses always started the same way. Thank you for your interest, however. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Interview at Morrison & Associates today at 2 p.m. I believe in you, baby girl. Tasha's stomach dropped. The accounting firm interview. She'd forgotten to request the afternoon off from Frank. Again. Think, Tasha, think, she muttered, grabbing her keys and rushing out the door. The T train to downtown Boston was packed with morning commuters. Lawyers in expensive suits scrolled through phones. Business executives clutched coffee cups that probably cost more than Tasha made in tips on a good day. She found herself studying their faces, wondering if any of them had started where she was now. A woman near the window was reviewing what looked like financial statements. Tasha's trained eye caught errors immediately. Depreciation calculations that would throw off the entire quarterly report. Her fingers itched to say something, but she pressed her lips together. Nobody wanted accounting advice from a waitress on the subway. The Beacon Hill Bistro sat on Charles Street like a jewel, its red brick facade and brass fixtures screaming old money. Tasha had worked there for 8 months, serving people who spent more on lunch than she made in a week. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could analyze their investment portfolios better than most of their accountants, but here she was, asking if they wanted their eggs over easy. You're cutting it close, Bennett, Frank DeLuca called from behind the host's stand. He was a decent boss, but punctuality was his religion. Sorry, Frank. Train delays. Tasha tied her apron, muscle memory taking over. Table 12 is expecting someone important for lunch. Big spender. Don't mess it up. Beatrice Walker, the head waitress who'd taken Tasha under her wing, appeared with a knowing smile. Let me guess, you forgot to ask for the afternoon off again. How did you? Honey, I've been watching you practice interview answers in the mirror during breaks. When's it at? 2 o'clock. Morrison & Associates. BA's eyes lit up. The accounting firm? Tasha, that's huge. If I can get there. Frank's already stressed about the lunch rush. We'll figure it out. Promise. The morning passed in a blur of orders and forced smiles. Tasha's mind kept drifting to the interview, running through potential questions and answers. She'd researched Morrison and Associates until her eyes burned. They specialized in corporate mergers, exactly the kind of work that made her pulse quicken. At 11:45 a.m., a black Tesla pulled up outside. The valet who rushed to open the door did so with a reverence reserved for serious money. Harrison Montgomery stepped onto the sidewalk, and the world seemed to shift slightly around him. 6'2" with salt and pepper hair that probably cost more to maintain than Tasha's rent, he wore authority like a second skin. His navy suit fit perfectly, and his Italian leather shoes caught the late morning sun. But Tasha noticed what others missed: the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he checked his phone, the slight tremor in his hand as he straightened his tie. This was a man under pressure. He strode into the restaurant like he owned it, which, given his net worth, he probably could have. Kelly Thompson, the hostess, practically glowed as she led him to table 12, the corner booth with the best view of the common. "Mr. Montgomery, welcome back," Kelly's voice pitched higher than usual. "Your guest hasn't arrived yet. He won't be coming. Cancel the reservation for 2, make it 1. And I need privacy. Complete privacy." Harrison slid into the booth, already pulling documents from his briefcase before Kelly had walked away. The papers scattered across the white tablecloth like fallen leaves, each one marked with red ink and sticky notes. From across the dining room, Tasha watched him work. She'd seen stressed customers before, but this was different. This man wasn't just busy, he was desperate. Her section included table 12. "Looks like your big spender is flying solo," Bea whispered as they crossed paths near the kitchen. "And he looks like he could use more than just lunch." Tasha grabbed the coffee pot and squared her shoulders. Time to earn those tips. She approached table 12 with professional confidence, but Harrison Montgomery didn't look up. His fingers traced columns of numbers, and she could see his lips moving as he calculated. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been at this for hours, maybe days. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I start you with some coffee?" He waved his hand dismissively without raising his head. The gesture hit Tasha like a slap, not because it was rude, but because it was invisible. To him, she wasn't even there. She poured the coffee anyway, watching steam rise from the cup. The documents spread before him told a story she couldn't ignore. Financial projections, merger details, due diligence reports. And right there, in black and white, numbers that made her breath catch. $356 million. Harrison muttered under his breath. "The calculation has to be wrong." Trevor ran it 3 times. "Where's the error?" Tasha's eyes moved across the papers without meaning to. It was like asking a pianist not to hear music, impossible to turn off years of training. The spreadsheet on top showed an acquisition analysis, and there, in the 3rd column, she saw it. The depreciation schedule was using straight line instead of accelerated depreciation for the target company's assets. A mistake that would overvalue the acquisition by exactly $356 million. Her heart pounded. This man was about to make a financial decision that would bankrupt companies and destroy lives, all because of a basic accounting error. "Excuse me," she heard herself say. Harrison's head snapped up, irritation flashing in his green eyes. "I said I needed privacy." "Line 47, Tasha said quietly. "Your depreciation calculation is wrong." The irritation died. Something else took its place. Shock, then disbelief, then the slow dawn of realization. "What did you just say?" "Line 47. You're using straight-line depreciation for industrial equipment that should be calculated using the double declining balance method. Your target valuation is overstated by approximately $356 million. Harrison Montgomery stared at her like she'd just spoken in tongues. The coffee pot in her hands suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "What have you done, Tasha? What have you done?" The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Harrison Montgomery's pen had stopped moving. His green eyes locked onto Tasha's face with an intensity that made her want to disappear into the restaurant's hardwood floors. "Say that again." His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Tasha's grip tightened on the coffee pot. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to back away, to return to her role as the invisible waitress. But the numbers burned in her mind like neon signs. $356 million. Enough to destroy his company, bankrupt the target acquisition, and eliminate thousands of jobs. Your depreciation schedule, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Industrial equipment like the manufacturing assets listed on page 3 requires accelerated depreciation under Section 168 of the tax code. You're calculating it as straight line, which spreads the deduction evenly over the asset's life instead of front-loading it. Harrison's face had gone pale. He grabbed the document she was referencing, his manicured fingers tracing the numbers. "Show me." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tasha glanced around the dining room. Other patrons were starting to stare. Frank was watching from behind the host stand, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Sir, I should probably—" "Show me," Harrison repeated, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Tasha set the coffee pot on the table with shaking hands. She leaned forward, pointing to the spreadsheet that had caught her attention. The movement brought her close enough to smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Here," she said, her finger hovering over column C. "You've got $38 million in manufacturing equipment valued using a 10-year straight-line depreciation. But these are CNC machines and automated assembly lines. Under MACRS, they qualify for 7-year property with double declining balance depreciation." Harrison followed her finger, his breathing shallow. Which means the present value of the depreciation tax shield is significantly higher than you've calculated. The target company's actual value is $356 million less than your analysis shows. The words settled over the table like a shroud. Harrison leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his salt and pepper hair. For a moment, he looked older than his 42 years. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "We're supposed to sign tomorrow morning." Tasha straightened, suddenly aware of how exposed she was standing there. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked at your private documents. You just saved my company from financial suicide." Harrison's eyes met hers again, and this time she saw something different. Respect. Wonder. Fear. "How did you see that so quickly?" The question hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she should cross. Tasha glanced toward the kitchen, where Bea was covering her other tables. The lunch rush was building, and she had responsibilities. But this man was looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. "I have a degree in accounting," she said quietly. "Boston University. I've been working in restaurants to pay the bills while I look for work in my field." Harrison blinked. "Once. Twice. You're an accountant." "Yes." "And you're working as a waitress." "Yes." The simple exchange hit Harrison like a physical blow. He thought about the hundreds of resumes that crossed his desk, the Ivy League credentials his HR department demanded, the 6-figure salaries he paid for expertise that hadn't caught what this woman had spotted in 30 seconds. "What's your name?" "Tasha. Tasha Bennett. Tasha Bennett." He said it like he was testing how it sounded. "How long did it take you to spot the error?" "About 10 seconds, she admitted. "I'm sorry, I really shouldn't have." "Don't apologize." Harrison's voice carried a sharpness that made her step back. "Don't you dare apologize for being brilliant." The word hung in the air between them. Brilliant. When was the last time someone had called her that? When was the last time anyone had seen her as more than just the woman who brought their food? "Mr. Montgomery, I really should get back to my other tables. How much do you make here?" The question came out blunt, direct. Tasha felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That's really not. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to understand how someone with your skills ends up serving coffee instead of saving companies from $250 million mistakes." The frustration that had been building for months suddenly boiled over. "Because nobody will hire me," Tasha said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Because I don't have connections. Because I graduated during a recession, and by the time the market recovered, I had gaps in my resume that made people assume I wasn't serious about my career. Because sometimes being qualified isn't enough." The words came out harder than she'd intended, carrying months of rejection and disappointment. Harrison absorbed them without flinching, his green eyes never leaving her face. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's not enough. And that's a damn shame." Across the dining room, Frank was making his way toward their table. His expression suggested that the private conversation between his waitress and his most important customer had gone on long enough. "Tasha," Harrison said urgently, "I need your help." "Sir, this merger. The signing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. My CFO ran these numbers 3 times. My entire acquisition team signed off on the analysis. But you're telling me we're about to overpay by $356 million. That's what the numbers show, yes. Then I need you to verify every calculation in this analysis. Tonight. I'll pay you whatever." "Excuse me." Frank's voice cut through their conversation like a cleaver. He stood beside their table with the practiced smile he reserved for difficult situations. "Ms. Bennett, I believe your other tables need attention." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Actually, Mr. DeLuca. Frank DeLuca. I own this establishment. Mr. DeLuca, Ms. Bennett has just provided me with financial consultation that may have saved my company from bankruptcy. I'd like to discuss retaining her services." Frank's eyebrows shot up. He looked from Harrison to Tasha and back again, clearly trying to process what he'd just heard. "Financial consultation?" Frank's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Tasha's a waitress." "Tasha's an accountant," Harrison corrected, his voice carrying enough authority to make Frank take a step back. "And apparently a damn good one." The moment crystallized around them. Other diners had turned to watch the drama unfolding at table 12. Tasha felt exposed, caught between 2 worlds that suddenly seemed impossible to reconcile. "I have an interview this afternoon," she said quietly. "At Morrison & Associates. I've been trying to get back into accounting for months." Harrison's expression changed. "Morrison & Associates. They're good, but they're small. Corporate tax work, mostly. Nothing like what you just did here." "It's a foot in the door," Tasha replied. "It's a chance. I'm offering you a better chance." The words hung in the air like a promise. Tasha looked at this man who 30 minutes ago had waved her away without looking up. Now he was staring at her like she held the key to his salvation. "What exactly are you offering?" "Come to my office tonight. Review the entire acquisition analysis. If you find what I think you're going to find, I'll hire you, full-time, as my senior financial analyst. Starting salary $200,000, plus bonuses based on the value you bring to the company." Tasha's world tilted. $200,000. More than 4 times what she made at the restaurant. More than she'd dared dream when she'd graduated from Boston University with honors and hope in her heart. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know you saved me from the biggest mistake of my career. I know you saw something in 30 seconds that my team of experts missed after weeks of analysis. I know you're working below your potential because the system failed you, not because you failed it." Frank cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private?" Harrison pulled a business card from his wallet and wrote something on the back. "My office address. 22nd floor. Be there at 6 p.m. He handed her the card, their fingers brushing for just a moment. "Don't go to that interview, Tasha. Come work for someone who recognizes what you're worth." He stood, leaving a $100 bill on the table for coffee he'd barely touched. "And Mr. DeLuca? You might want to reconsider how you evaluate the talent working in your restaurant." Harrison Montgomery walked out of the Beacon Hill Bistro like a man who'd just found salvation in the most unlikely place. Behind him, he left a waitress holding a business card and a future that suddenly looked very different than it had an hour ago. Tasha stared at the card in her trembling hands. Montgomery Ventures. 1 Boston Place. And on the back, written in bold handwriting, "Some opportunities only come once. Don't let this one pass you by. H.M." "Well," Frank said quietly, "that was unexpected." Tasha looked up at her boss, then at B, who had appeared at her elbow with wide eyes and an open mouth. The lunch rush continued around them, But everything felt different now. The world had shifted, and Tasha Bennett was no longer invisible. But with opportunity came fear. What if she wasn't as good as he thought? What if this was all a mistake? What if she failed him the way she'd failed herself for the past 4 years? "Tasha," he whispered, "did that man just offer you a job?" "I think so," Tasha replied, her voice barely audible. "What are you going to do?" Tasha looked at the business card again, then at her reflection in the restaurant's window. For the first time in months, the woman looking back at her didn't look tired. She looked terrified and exhilarated and hopeful all at once. "I don't know," she said. "I honestly don't know." But deep in her chest, something that had been dormant for years was starting to wake up. It felt dangerous and wonderful and absolutely terrifying. It felt like possibility. The business card felt like it might spontaneously combust in Tasha's pocket. She'd touched it 17 times in the past hour, each time wondering if she'd imagined the entire conversation. $200,000. The number rolled around in her mind like a marble in an empty jar. "You're going to wear a hole in that uniform if you keep pacing," he said, refilling salt shakers at the service station. "Talk to me, honey. What's really going on in that head of yours?" Tasha stopped mid-stride. The lunch rush had died down, leaving only a few scattered customers picking at dessert. Through the window, she could see Harrison's Tesla pulling away from the curb, disappearing into Boston traffic like a mirage. "He doesn't know me, B. I pointed out one error in a document I wasn't supposed to read, and suddenly he wants to hand me a career? People don't do that. Not for someone like me." "Someone like you?" BEA's voice carried a warning edge. "You mean someone brilliant? Someone who just saved a billionaire from financial disaster? Someone with no connections, no experience in corporate finance, no track record?" Tasha's voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone who's been serving coffee for 8 months because she can't get anyone to take her seriously." B set down the salt shaker with more force than necessary. "Tasha Bennett, I have watched you balance books for this restaurant in your head while you're taking orders. I've seen you spot inventory discrepancies that our accountant missed. You think I don't notice when you correct the math on customer receipts before Frank sees them?" The words hit Tasha like cold water. She hadn't realized anyone was watching, paying attention to the small ways she couldn't turn off her analytical mind even while carrying plates and refilling coffee cups. "That's different. That's just you being exactly who you are. The question is, are you brave enough to be that person somewhere that matters?" Before Tasha could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How did the morning go, sweetheart? Still excited about the Morrison interview?" The Morrison and Associates interview. Tasha had completely forgotten. She glanced at the clock above the kitchen door. 1:35 p.m. The interview was in 25 minutes, and she hadn't even asked Frank for the time off. "Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!" Tasha fumbled for her apron strings. "B, I have to go. The interview." "Whoa, slow down." B caught her arm. "What interview?" "Morrison and Associates. 2 o'clock. I've been preparing for weeks." Tasha's words tumbled over each other. "This is what I've been working toward. This is my shot at getting back into accounting." "And what about the offer from Mr. Tall, Dark, and Loaded?" Tasha pulled Harrison's business card from her pocket, staring at the elegant script of his company name. "That's not real. That's impulse. People don't hire strangers off the street to be senior financial analysts. People don't save companies $300 million over coffee either, but here we are." Frank appeared from the back office, his expression already suggesting he knew what was coming. "Let me guess. You need the afternoon off for that interview." "I'm sorry, Frank. I know the timing is terrible. Go." Frank's voice was gentler than she'd expected. "After what I witnessed at table 12, I think we both know you're meant for bigger things than this place." The words should have felt like freedom, but instead they felt like another door closing. Tasha nodded, grabbed her purse from behind the bar, and hurried toward the exit. "Tasha," Frank called after her. "For what it's worth, That man looked at you like you just handed him the moon. Don't be too quick to dismiss what that might mean. 20 minutes later, Tasha sat in the waiting room of Morrison & Associates, trying to calm her racing heart. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Conservative gray carpeting, leather chairs that had seen better days, and the faint smell of old coffee and copy toner. This was the accounting world she knew, the one she'd been trying to enter for 4 years. Ms. Bennett, a woman in her 50s, emerged from an inner office, hand extended. I'm Patricia Morrison. Thank you for coming in. Patricia Morrison was everything Tasha had imagined. Professional suit in navy blue, sensible shoes, graying hair pulled back in a neat chignon. She led Tasha into an office lined with tax code manuals and diplomas that spoke of decades in the profession. I've reviewed your resume, Patricia said, settling behind her desk. Boston University. Excellent grades. But I have to ask about the gap. 4 years is a long time to be out of the field. Tasha had prepared for this question, rehearsed the answer until it sounded natural. I've been working in customer service while searching for the right opportunity. It's taught me valuable skills in client relations and working under pressure. Customer service. Patricia's tone suggested she found the euphemism transparent. You've been waiting tables. The blunt assessment hit harder than it should have. Yes, I've been waiting tables. Ms. Bennett, I appreciate your honesty, but I have to be direct. Morrison & Associates handles corporate tax preparation and small business accounting. We need someone who can hit the ground running, not someone we have to retrain after years away from the field. Tasha felt the familiar weight of rejection settling on her shoulders. I understand. But if you'll give me a chance. I'm sorry. I really am. You seem like a lovely person, but we need experience. Actual, recent experience. The interview was over before it had really begun. Tasha found herself back on the street, another rejection to add to her collection. She pulled out her phone and stared at Harrison's business card, the late afternoon sun making the ink shimmer. 6 blocks away, Harrison Montgomery sat in his corner office on the 22nd floor of One Boston Place, staring at the same acquisition documents that had nearly destroyed his company. Trevor Hayes, his CFO and closest friend, paced behind the leather chairs like a caged animal. You offered her how much? Trevor's voice had climbed an octave since Harrison had finished explaining the restaurant encounter. 200,000. Plus bonuses. Harry, you've lost your mind. You don't hire people off the street. You don't make job offers to waitresses who happen to. She's not just a waitress. Harrison's voice carried an edge that made Trevor stop pacing. She's an accountant. Boston University, magna cum laude. And she spotted a $356 million error that your team missed. My team has been working on this acquisition for 6 months. We've run every possible scenario. Except the right one. Harrison stood, walking to the window that overlooked Boston Harbor. Trevor, we've been friends since Harvard Business School. I trust your judgment more than anyone's. But you missed something fundamental, and she caught it in 30 seconds. Trevor dropped into one of the leather chairs, running his hands through his thinning hair. Okay, fine. She's smart. I'll give you that. But hiring her as senior financial analyst? That's insane. You don't know anything about her work history, her references, her. I know she saved our company from bankruptcy. You know she pointed out an error. That doesn't make her qualified to handle merger analysis, due diligence, financial modeling. Doesn't it? Harrison turned from the window. When was the last time you've seen that kind of analytical thinking? That quick. That precise. Trevor leaned forward, his expression serious. Harry, I'm saying this as your friend. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. This woman impressed you, and now you're making decisions with your heart instead of your head. The words stung because they carried a grain of truth. Harrison had been impressed, not just by Tasha's analytical skills, but by something else. The way she'd stood her ground when he'd challenged her. The fire in her eyes when she talked about being overlooked and undervalued. The quiet dignity with which she'd handled his initial dismissiveness. Maybe you're right, Harrison said quietly. Maybe I am letting emotion affect my judgment. Good. So we'll forget about this and focus on damage control. I'll call the acquisition team, we'll run new numbers, and... But what if emotion is exactly what this company needs? Harrison interrupted. What if we've become so focused on credentials and connections that we're missing real talent? Trevor stood, his frustration evident. Harry, I need you to think about this rationally. You're talking about gambling a senior position on someone you met an hour ago. Someone with no corporate experience, no track record. Someone who saved us $356 million. Someone who got lucky and spotted an error. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 22 floors below. Harrison looked at his oldest friend and business partner, seeing the concern and genuine care in Trevor's eyes. What if you're wrong? Harrison asked quietly. What if she's exactly what this company needs, and we let her walk away because we're too afraid to take a chance? And what if you're wrong? What if she's a disaster? What if this decision comes back to haunt us? Harrison walked back to his desk, picking up the acquisition documents that had started this entire chain of events. The red ink and sticky notes seemed to mock him, evidence of how close he'd come to making the biggest mistake of his career. Then I'll deal with the consequences, he said finally. But I'm not going to lose someone with that kind of talent because I was too scared to trust my instincts. Trevor shook his head. You're making a mistake, Harry. I hope you realize that before it's too late. After Trevor left, Harrison sat alone in his office, watching the sun set over Boston Harbor. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the acquisition team, probably wanting to discuss the new depreciation calculations. Instead, he found himself thinking about a woman with tired eyes and brilliant insights, serving coffee in a restaurant where no one saw her potential. At 5:45 p.m., he was still sitting at his desk, wondering if she would come. At 5:50 p.m., Tasha Bennett stood in the lobby of One Boston Place, staring at the elevator bank and fighting every instinct that told her to turn around and go home. The Morrison and Associates rejection still stung, another reminder that the accounting world had no place for someone like her. But Harrison Montgomery's words echoed in her mind. Don't let this one pass you by. At 5:55 p.m., she stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 22nd floor. Some chances, she realized, were too terrifying to walk away from. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a hallway lined with frosted glass and polished marble. Montgomery Ventures occupied the entire 22nd floor, and the reception area looked like something from a magazine. Modern furniture in shades of gray and white, abstract art that probably cost more than Tasha's annual salary, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Boston at twilight. The receptionist had gone home for the day, leaving only a security guard who directed Tasha toward the corner office. Her footsteps echoed on the marble, each sound amplifying her growing sense that she didn't belong in this world of expensive suits and casual millions. Harrison's office door stood ajar. Through the gap, she could see him hunched over his desk, surrounded by documents and multiple computer screens. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. The sight made something flutter in Tasha's chest, a recognition that beneath the billionaire exterior was just a man, working late and wrestling with problems that seemed impossible to solve. She knocked softly on the doorframe. Harrison looked up, and his face transformed. Relief, surprise, and something else, something warmer, flashed across his features. You came. I said I would. Tasha stepped into the office, trying not to gawk at the view of Boston Harbor spread out beyond the windows. Though I have to admit, I almost talked myself out of it about 6 times on the way up. What changed your mind? The Morrison interview. Tasha's voice carried a bitter edge. Turns out 4 years is too long to be away from the field. According to Patricia Morrison, I'm damaged goods. Harrison's jaw tightened. Their loss. Our gain. He gestured toward the conference table that dominated one corner of his office. I've had our entire acquisition team working since this afternoon. The good news is you were right. The bad news is it's worse than we thought. The conference table was covered with documents, laptops, legal pads covered with calculations, and empty coffee cups that suggested this had been an intense few hours. 3 people looked up as Tasha approached. 2 men in their 30s wearing expressions of barely concealed skepticism, and a woman who appeared to be taking notes on everything. Tasha Bennett, meet the team, Harrison said. Derek Walsh, our head of acquisitions. Kevin Park, senior analyst. And Jennifer Cole, our legal counsel. Derek stood first, extending his hand with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. So you're the waitress who's about to revolutionize our industry. The words hit like a slap. Tasha felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Harrison's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Tasha is the accountant who prevented us from making a $356 million mistake. I suggest you show the appropriate respect. An uncomfortable silence settled over the group. Derek's smile faltered, and Kevin suddenly found his laptop screen fascinating. Jennifer looked between the men with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. Perhaps we should focus on the numbers, Jennifer suggested diplomatically. We've confirmed Ms. Bennett's initial assessment, but there are additional complications we need to discuss. Harrison pulled out a chair for Tasha at the conference table. The gesture was small but significant, a clear signal that she belonged here, despite the skeptical looks from his team. The depreciation error was just the beginning, Kevin said, his tone more professional than Derek's but still carrying an undertone of doubt. When we corrected the calculation, we discovered the target company has been using aggressive accounting practices throughout their operations. Tasha leaned forward, studying the spreadsheets spread across the table. Her trained eye caught patterns immediately. Revenue recognition irregularities, suspicious timing of write-offs, depreciation schedules that seemed designed more for tax avoidance than accurate financial reporting. Channel stuffing, she said quietly, pointing to a series of transactions in the fourth quarter. They're booking revenue for products shipped to distributors without confirmed end-user sales. Classic earnings manipulation. Derek's eyebrows shot up. How did you? The quarterly pattern is obvious once you know what to look for. Revenue spikes at quarter end, followed by increased returns and allowances in the following period. Tasha's finger traced the numbers across multiple quarters. They're inflating current performance at the expense of future periods. Kevin leaned closer, his skepticism beginning to crack. We missed that. You weren't looking for it, Tasha replied without judgment. When you're focused on valuation metrics, it's easy to miss operational red flags. But this pattern suggests systemic issues with management integrity. Harrison watched the exchange with growing amazement. In 10 minutes, Tasha had identified problems that his team had overlooked despite months of analysis. More importantly, she was doing it without arrogance or condescension, simply sharing knowledge like it was the most natural thing in the world. There's more, Jennifer said, opening a thick legal binder. Once we started digging deeper, we found regulatory compliance issues, EPA violations, OSHA citations, and what appears to be an ongoing investigation by the Department of Labor. Which explains why they're eager to sell, Derek added, his tone now carrying grudging respect for Tasha's insights. They need cash for remediation and legal settlements. Tasha studied the legal documents, her mind racing through the implications. What's the timeline on the acquisition? Signing is tomorrow at 9 a.m., Harrison replied. Or was supposed to be. Given what we've discovered, that's obviously not happening. Can you postpone? Not without triggering penalty clauses in our agreement. We either sign tomorrow or walk away completely. The weight of the decision settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Months of work, millions in due diligence costs, and Harrison's reputation all hung in the balance. What if we renegotiate the price? Tasha asked. Based on the corrected valuation and the additional risk factors? Kevin shook his head. They'll never accept a reduction that large. We're talking about cutting the offer price by 60%. Then we walk away, Derek said firmly. Cut our losses and move on. Harrison leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. That's 3 months of work down the drain. Plus, our investors were counting on this acquisition for next quarter's growth targets. Better than losing the company, Jennifer pointed out. Is it, though? Tasha's voice was quiet, but something in her tone made everyone turn to look at her. What if there's a third option? Harrison's green eyes locked onto hers. I'm listening. You said they need cash for legal settlements and remediation, right? What if instead of acquiring the company, you structured a distressed debt deal? Provide emergency financing at favorable terms, with equity conversion options tied to performance milestones. The room went silent. Derek and Kevin exchanged glances, while Jennifer frantically took notes. Explain, Harrison said. Tasha stood, moving to the whiteboard mounted on one wall. She grabbed a marker and began sketching out a financial structure that was forming in her mind. Bridge financing of $200 million at 12% interest, she said, drawing boxes and arrows that illustrated the deal flow. Convertible to equity at a significant discount if they hit remediation targets and compliance milestones. If they succeed, you get the company at a fair price. If they fail, you have a senior secured position and can acquire the assets through bankruptcy court at an even better price. Kevin stared at the whiteboard. That's actually brilliant. It gives them the cash they need while protecting your downside risk, Tasha continued. Plus, the performance milestones ensure they address the operational issues before you take full ownership. Derek was nodding slowly. The debt structure gives us leverage to demand management changes and operational improvements. And if they can't meet the milestones, we're positioned to acquire the cleaned-up assets at liquidation prices, Jennifer added, her legal mind already working through the implications. Harrison stood, studying the diagram Tasha had created. The elegance of the solution was breathtaking. It addressed every concern they'd raised while creating multiple paths to success. How long would it take to structure a deal like this? He asked Jennifer. Working through the night. We could have term sheets ready by morning. Do it. Harrison's voice carried the authority of decision. Derek, contact their team and request an emergency meeting for 8 a.m. Kevin, start modeling the debt scenarios. Jennifer, draft the preliminary agreements. As his team sprang into action, Harrison found himself alone with Tasha at the conference table. The office had taken on the energy of a war room, but in the sudden quiet between them, something else crackled in the air. You just saved the deal, Harrison said quietly. We saved the deal, Tasha corrected. I couldn't have done this without your team's research. My team missed the fundamental problems. You saw them immediately. Tasha felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just approached it from a different angle. The right angle. Harrison moved closer, and Tasha became acutely aware of his presence. The way he smelled like expensive cologne and coffee, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her careful defenses. The question is, are you ready for what comes next? What do you mean? This deal is going to require intensive management over the next 6 months. Daily oversight, constant analysis, hands-on problem solving. I need someone I can trust to handle it. The implication hung in the air between them. This wasn't just about one night's work or a single brilliant insight. Harrison was offering her a chance to prove herself on a deal that could make or break both their careers. What if I'm not ready? The question slipped out before Tasha could stop it. What if tonight was just luck? Harrison stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Then we'll figure it out together. But I don't think it was luck, Tasha. I think this is who you really are when someone gives you the chance to show it. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and risk. Outside the windows, Boston glittered in the darkness, a city full of dreams and second chances. Inside the conference room, two people from completely different worlds stood on the edge of something that could change everything. So, Harrison said, his voice soft but steady, are you ready to save a company? Tasha looked at the whiteboard where her solution was sketched out in blue marker, then at the man who had seen her potential when no one else would. Fear and excitement warred in her chest, but when she spoke, her voice was strong. Let's get to work. And for the first time in 4 years, Tasha Bennett felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The conference room had transformed into a war zone of financial documents, empty takeout containers, and laptops running complex models. Jennifer had left an hour ago to draft legal documents from her home office, while Derek and Kevin worked through debt scenarios and risk assessments. The city beyond the windows had settled into late-night quiet, leaving only the occasional flash of headlights on the streets below. Tasha sat across from Harrison at the conference table, both of them deep in calculations that would determine the fate of a $200 million deal. Her blazer hung on the back of her chair, and she'd kicked off her shoes hours ago. Somehow, the informal atmosphere made the space feel less intimidating and more like what it was: two people working together to solve an impossible puzzle. The debt service coverage ratios work if they can maintain current cash flow, Tasha said, highlighting numbers on her laptop screen. But we need to account for the remediation costs eating into operating income. Harrison leaned closer to see her analysis, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What if we structure the payments with a 6-month grace period? Give them time to implement efficiency improvements before the debt service kicks in. Their eyes met across the laptop screen, and for a moment, the financial models faded into background noise. There was something electric in the air between them. Not just professional respect, but something deeper and more dangerous. Tasha cleared her throat and looked back at the numbers. That could work. But it increases our risk exposure during the initial period. Everything worth doing involves risk, Harrison said quietly. His voice carried layers of meaning that had nothing to do with debt structures and everything to do with the space between them. Before Tasha could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and winced. "Problem?" Harrison asked. "My mother. She's asking about the Morrison interview." Tasha set the phone face down on the table. "I haven't told her what happened today. Any of it. What would you tell her?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tasha stared at the financial models on her screen, but her mind drifted to her childhood home in Dorchester, to a woman who had worked double shifts as a public school teacher to put her daughter through college. "She sacrificed everything for my education," Tasha said finally. "Took on student loans she's still paying back. Worked summers and weekends tutoring other kids to afford my textbooks." Her voice grew soft. "She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Harrison waited, sensing there was more. "When I graduated from Boston University, she threw this party. Invited everyone from our neighborhood. She was so proud, showing off my diploma to anyone who would listen." Tasha's fingers traced the edge of her laptop. She kept telling people her daughter was going to be a successful accountant, that all the sacrifices had been worth it. And then the recession hit. The job market collapsed. By the time things improved, I had gaps in my resume that made me unemployable. Tasha's voice carried 4 years of accumulated disappointment. Every rejection letter felt like I was failing her all over again. Harrison studied her face in the soft glow of the laptop screens. "Is that why you took the restaurant job?" "I had to pay rent. But also—" Tasha paused, wrestling with words she'd never spoken aloud. "Also because I was starting to believe they were right. That maybe I wasn't as smart as I thought. Maybe I didn't belong in corporate finance after all." The admission hung between them like a confession. Harrison felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of pain that mirrored his own hidden wounds. "You want to know something?" Harrison said, his voice quieter than she'd heard it all day. 5 years ago, I almost lost everything." Tasha looked up, surprised by the sudden vulnerability in his tone. Montgomery Ventures was hemorrhaging money. Bad investments, worse timing, and a management team that included my ex-wife. Harrison's jaw tightened at the memory. Rebecca was our chief marketing officer. Brilliant woman, or so I thought. Turns out she was brilliant at embezzling funds and covering her tracks. What happened? I discovered she'd been skimming money from client accounts to fund a competitor's startup. When I confronted her, she claimed the marriage had been part of her long-term strategy to gain access to our operations. Harrison's laugh held no humor. She'd been planning to destroy the company from the inside, take our client list, and launch a rival firm. Tasha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. How much did she steal? $43 million. Nearly bankrupted us. Harrison walked to the window, staring out at the dark harbor. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that someone I loved, someone I trusted completely, had been lying to me for 3 years. How did you recover? I mortgaged everything. Sold my house, my cars, cashed out my retirement accounts. Spent 18 months working 20-hour days to rebuild client trust and company reputation. Harrison turned back to face her. Trevor was the only person who stuck with me through all of it. Everyone else, friends, business associates, even family members, they all disappeared when the scandal broke. The revelation recontextualized everything Tasha thought she knew about Harrison Montgomery. The confident billionaire facade suddenly seemed like armor, protection against a world that had betrayed him in the most personal way possible. "Is that why you're taking a chance on me?" she asked. "Because you know what it's like to be overlooked?" "Partly." Harrison returned to his seat across from her. "But mostly because I recognize something in you that I wish I'd had 5 years ago." "What's that?" "Integrity. When you could have walked away from that restaurant table, could have ignored what you saw in those documents, you chose to speak up. Even though it wasn't your responsibility. Even though it could have gotten you in trouble." Tasha felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I couldn't just let you make that mistake." "Why? You didn't know me. Didn't owe me anything." The question forced Tasha to examine motivations she'd barely acknowledged to herself. "Because I know what it's like to fail. I know what it feels like when everything falls apart despite your best efforts. I couldn't watch someone else go through that if I had the power to prevent it." Harrison leaned forward, his green eyes intense. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. In a world full of people looking out for themselves, you chose to help a stranger. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." The moment stretched between them, charged with understanding and something deeper. For the first time, Tasha saw past Harrison's wealth and success to the man underneath. Someone who had been broken and rebuilt himself, someone who understood betrayal and loss. "Can I ask you something?" Tasha said. "Anything. Why didn't you just hire a traditional consulting firm to handle this crisis? Why take a risk on someone like me?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Because traditional consulting firms think like my ex-wife. They see opportunities for personal gain, not solutions for shared success. They would have found ways to profit from our crisis, not prevent it." "And you think I'm different?" "I know you're different. You've had opportunities tonight to position yourself for maximum personal gain, demand a higher salary, negotiate equity participation, even leverage what you know for a better offer elsewhere. Instead, you've focused entirely on finding the best solution for everyone involved." Tasha felt heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't even considered using her leverage for personal advantage. The idea felt foreign, almost distasteful. "Maybe that makes me naive. Maybe that makes you exactly what this industry needs." Harrison reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers as he pointed to something on her laptop screen. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "Look at what you've created tonight. A deal structure that protects our investment, gives the target company a path to recovery, and ensures their employees keep their jobs. Traditional finance would have focused on maximizing short-term returns, not finding sustainable solutions." Tasha stared at their hands, his tanned and confident, hers smaller but steady. The touch felt significant, a bridge between their professional collaboration and something more personal. "There's something else," Harrison said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Something I haven't told anyone, not even Trevor." Tasha looked up, meeting his eyes. "After Rebecca's betrayal, I swore I'd never again let personal feelings influence business decisions. For 5 years, I've kept every relationship at arm's length. Employees, partners, even friends. I told myself it was protection, that emotional distance was the price of business success. And now I'm sitting in a conference room at midnight with a woman who's turned my world upside down in 12 hours. Someone who makes me want to take risks I swore I'd never take again." The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Tasha felt her heart racing, aware that they had crossed some invisible line from professional collaboration into territory that was far more dangerous and infinitely more promising. "Harrison," she said softly, I. Her phone rang, cutting through the moment like a blade. The caller ID showed her mother's contact information. I should take this, Tasha said reluctantly. Tasha? Baby, it's almost midnight. How did the interview go? Dr. Helen Bennett's voice carried the concern and love that had sustained Tasha through 4 years of rejection and disappointment. Suddenly, the weight of the day, the restaurant encounter, the Morrison rejection, this impossible opportunity, crashed over her like a wave. Mom, she said, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't quite contain. What's wrong? Did something happen? Tasha looked across the table at Harrison, who was watching her with an expression of understanding and patience. In his eyes, she saw not judgment but recognition, someone who knew what it meant to disappoint the people you loved most. Mom, she said again, I need to tell you about my day. And for the first time in months, Tasha Bennett felt ready to share hope instead of heartbreak. Tasha held the phone to her ear, watching Harrison pretend to focus on spreadsheets while clearly listening to her conversation. The gesture was oddly comforting, this powerful man giving her space while staying close enough to offer silent support. Mom, you're not going to believe what happened today, Tasha began, settling back in her chair. Remember how you always said that sometimes the universe has bigger plans than we do? Dr. Helen Bennett's warm laugh carried across the phone line. Baby girl, you sound different. What's going on? I'm sitting in a billionaire's office at midnight, helping structure a $200 million deal. Silence. Then, Tasha Marie Bennett, you better start from the beginning and don't leave out a single detail. For the next 20 minutes, Tasha told her mother everything. The restaurant encounter, Harrison's offer, the Morrison rejection, and the evening's financial revelations. Harrison continued working, but she caught him smiling at her descriptions of the depreciation error and the team's initial skepticism. So this Mr. Montgomery, Helen said when Tasha finished. He recognized your worth immediately? He gave me a chance when no one else would. And he's treating you with respect? As an equal. Tasha glanced at Harrison, who had moved to the whiteboard and was refining her debt structure with additional notations. More than respect, Mom. He's treating me like a partner. Good. Because my daughter is nobody's charity case. You earned this opportunity. Helen's voice carried the fierce pride that had sustained Tasha through 4 years of doubt. When do you start officially? Tomorrow morning, if the deal goes through. We're presenting to the target company at 8 a.m. Then you better get some rest. And Tasha, I love you. I'm proud of you. I always have been, even when you couldn't see it in yourself. After hanging up, Tasha found Harrison watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Good conversation? The best I've had with her in months. Usually, our calls are about job rejections and how to stretch grocery money until payday. Tasha stretched, suddenly aware of how long they'd been working. She likes you, by the way. She doesn't know me. She knows you saw my worth when everyone else saw a waitress. That's enough for Dr. Helen Bennett to approve of someone. Harrison set down his marker and turned from the whiteboard. Dr. Bennett? Retired high school principal. 35 years in public education, most of it in underserved communities. She has strong opinions about people who write off others based on surface appearances. Smart woman. I'd like to meet her someday. The casual comment sent a flutter through Tasha's chest. Meeting parents implied a future that extended beyond one night's collaboration, beyond professional necessity into something more personal. She'd interrogate you, Tasha warned. Mom doesn't believe in small talk. She'd want to know your intentions, your values, your 5-year plan. What would you tell her my intentions are? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that had nothing to do with financial deals. Tasha felt heat rise in her cheeks as she met Harrison's steady gaze. I'd tell her you're a good man who's been hurt badly enough to build walls around himself. And that maybe you're starting to wonder if those walls are worth maintaining. Harrison moved closer, perching on the edge of the conference table beside her chair. And what would you tell her about your intentions? That I'm terrified and exhilarated and completely out of my depth. That I'm working with someone who makes me want to be braver than I actually am. You are brave, Tasha. Braver than you know. How can you say that? You've known me for 12 hours. Sometimes 12 hours is enough. Harrison's voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes you meet someone and recognize something in them that feels like coming home. The words hit Tasha like a physical force. She'd felt it too, this sense of rightness, of pieces clicking into place in ways that defied logic or timeline. But hearing it acknowledged made it real in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Harrison," she said softly, "we barely know each other. Then tell me something else. Something real." Tasha considered the request, then made a decision that surprised her. "I used to dance. Dance. Ballet. From age 5 through high school. I was good, really good. My teacher thought I might have a shot at professional companies." Tasha's voice carried the echo of old dreams. "But my mother couldn't afford the training costs, the travel to auditions, the years of uncertainty while trying to make it. So you chose accounting instead." "I chose stability. A career with clear paths and predictable outcomes." Tasha laughed, but it carried no humor. "Shows how well that worked out." Harrison was quiet for a moment, processing this glimpse into roads not taken. "Do you miss it? Dancing. Every day. Sometimes I'll hear music and my body will remember movements I haven't done in 10 years. It's like muscle memory for dreams you've given up." "Show me." "What?" "Show me. Dance for me." Tasha's eyes widened. "Here. Now." "There's no music, and I'm in work clothes, and—" "There's always music," Harrison said, pulling out his phone. "And you're beautiful exactly as you are." The compliment hit her like a gentle blow. Beautiful. When was the last time someone had called her beautiful? When was the last time she'd felt it? Harrison scrolled through his phone and selected something soft and instrumental, a piece that seemed to understand the late-night intimacy of their shared space. As the melody filled the conference room, he stepped back to give her room. "I can't," Tasha whispered. "I'm too rusty, too out of shape." "You can," Harrison said firmly. "Just feel the music." Slowly, hesitantly, Tasha stood. The music wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, and her body began to remember. Small movements at first, a gentle port de bras, a simple tendu. But as the melody continued, muscle memory took over. She moved across the conference room with a grace that transformed the corporate space into something magical. Her arms flowed like water, her legs remembered positions that had once been second nature. The movement was rusty, imperfect, but it carried an emotional honesty that took Harrison's breath away. For 3 minutes, Tasha Bennett wasn't a struggling accountant or an undervalued waitress. She was pure expression, pure joy, pure beauty in motion. When the music ended, she found herself beside the windows overlooking Boston Harbor, breathing hard and glowing with the remembered pleasure of movement. Harrison stood frozen, staring at her like he'd just witnessed something sacred. "That was—" He began, then stopped, unable to find words adequate to what he'd just seen. "Embarrassing," Tasha suggested, suddenly self-conscious. "Breathtaking." Harrison moved toward her, his eyes never leaving her face. "You are extraordinary, Tasha Bennett. Not just your mind, not just your analytical skills. You. All of you." The words hung between them, charged with truth and possibility. Tasha felt something shift in her chest, walls she'd built around old dreams, around the idea that she could be seen as more than the sum of her resume. "Harrison," she whispered. He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The space between them crackled with energy that had nothing to do with financial models and everything to do with the recognition of kindred spirits. "I want to kiss you," he said quietly. "But I need you to know that this isn't about the job, isn't about what happened today. This is about who you are, who you've always been." Tasha's heart raced. Everything logical told her this was too fast, too complicated, too risky. But everything real told her this was exactly right. "I want that too," she admitted. "But I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of believing this is real. Of hoping for something that might disappear when the sun comes up." Harrison reached up to touch her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. "I can't promise what tomorrow will bring. But I can promise that what I feel right now is real. What I see in you is real." Tasha leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as months of loneliness and self-doubt began to crack under the weight of being truly seen. "The last man I trusted," she said quietly, "was my college boyfriend. He left when graduation came and my job prospects looked uncertain. Said he couldn't afford to be with someone who might drag down his career trajectory. Then he was an idiot. Or practical. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes." Harrison's thumb traced across her cheekbone. "The difference is that practical people make calculated decisions based on external factors. Idiots walk away from extraordinary women because they're too stupid to recognize what they have." The words wrapped around Tasha's heart like a bomb. She opened her eyes, meeting Harrison's gaze with a mixture of vulnerability and growing trust. "If we do this," she said, "if we cross this line, everything changes. Everything already has changed. The question is whether we're brave enough to see where it leads." Tasha thought about her mother's sacrifices, about 4 years of rejection and disappointment, about the dance that had reminded her who she used to be before the world convinced her to settle for less. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Okay, let's be brave." Harrison's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. He leaned down, and Tasha rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips touched softly at first, tentatively, like a question being asked and answered. Then deeper, with growing certainty and need. Harrison's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as she wrapped her arms around his neck. The kiss tasted like possibility and coffee, and the promise of something neither of them had dared hope for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the city sparkled beyond the windows like a million possibilities waiting to be explored. "So," Harrison said, his forehead resting against hers, "what happens now?" "Now we finish saving your company," Tasha replied, smiling up at him. "And then we figure out how to save each other." Outside, Boston slept peacefully, unaware that in a conference room 22 floors above the harbor, two hearts had just discovered that sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as ordinary moments. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those moments turn into something that changes everything. The morning sun streamed through the conference room windows, casting long shadows across the scattered documents that told the story of their all-night collaboration. Tasha sat at the table, hair slightly mussed from the few hours of sleep she'd managed on Harrison's office couch, reviewing final calculations on her laptop. Across from her, Harrison was on his third cup of coffee, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up like a man who'd fought a battle and wasn't sure if he'd won. They'd worked until 4 a.m., refining every detail of the debt restructuring proposal. Between financial models and legal frameworks, they'd stolen moments, shared smiles, gentle touches, conversations that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the connection building between them. The kiss from hours earlier still lingered in the air like a promise. "The presentation materials are ready," Tasha said, sliding a folder across the table. "Debt structure, payment schedules, performance milestones, and exit strategies. Everything we discussed." Harrison reviewed the documents, marveling again at the elegance of her solution. "This is brilliant work, Tasha. You've thought of contingencies I wouldn't have considered." "We make a good team," she replied, allowing herself a small smile that carried layers of meaning. Before Harrison could respond, the conference room door burst open. Trevor Hayes stormed in, his face flushed and his usually perfect appearance disheveled. Behind him came Derek and Kevin, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Harry, we need to talk. Now." Trevor's voice carried an edge Tasha had never heard before. "Trevor, you remember Tasha Bennett?" "Oh, I remember Ms. Bennett perfectly." Trevor's gaze swept over Tasha with undisguised hostility. "The waitress who's apparently been calling the shots around here for the past 12 hours. Tasha felt ice form in her stomach. Something was very wrong. "Trevor, what's this about?" Harrison's voice carried a warning, but Trevor either didn't hear it or didn't care. "It's about damage control, Harry. It's about preventing this company from becoming a laughingstock." Trevor threw a tablet onto the conference table with enough force to make Tasha jump. "Check the financial news." Harrison picked up the tablet, his face darkening as he read. Tasha could see the headline from across the table: Montgomery Ventures in crisis. Sources report major acquisition error. How did this get out? Harrison's voice was deadly quiet. Good question, Trevor said, his eyes never leaving Tasha's face. The article quotes an inside source familiar with the deal, who claims Montgomery Ventures nearly overpaid by hundreds of millions due to basic accounting errors missed by our team. Tasha's blood turned to ice. You think I think it's quite a coincidence that 12 hours after a complete stranger gains access to our most sensitive financial information, details of our private deal negotiations are splashed across the business section. Trevor, that's enough. Harrison stood, his voice carrying authority and warning. Is it, Harry? Because I've been doing some research on Ms. Bennett here. Trevor pulled out his phone, reading from notes. 4 years of unemployment, mounting debt, student loans in default. Sounds like someone who might be motivated to sell information to the highest bidder. How dare you? Tasha began, but Trevor cut her off. How much did they pay you? Which competitor bought the intel? Was it Blackstone? Carlyle? The accusations hit Tasha like physical blows. She stood on unsteady legs, her professional composure cracking under the assault. I would never. Wouldn't you? You expect us to believe that a waitress with no corporate experience just happened to spot errors that our team of experts missed? That you just happened to care about the welfare of a company you'd never heard of 12 hours ago? Harrison moved between Trevor and Tasha, his face dark with anger. Trevor, you're way out of line. Am I? Harry, think about this logically. She shows up at exactly the right moment with exactly the right insights to make herself indispensable. Classic corporate espionage tactics. That's insane, Tasha said, finding her voice. I was working at the restaurant. I saw the documents by accident. Accident? Trevor's laugh was harsh. You just accidentally read confidential financial statements? You just accidentally had the expertise to spot complex accounting errors? You just accidentally positioned yourself to become Harry's newest senior analyst. Each word felt like a knife. Tasha looked at Harrison, desperate for support, for some sign that he didn't believe Trevor's accusations. But Harrison's face had gone carefully blank, the warm connection of hours earlier replaced by something that looked disturbingly like doubt. The timing is suspicious, Derek added reluctantly. The leak happening so quickly after. After what? Tasha's voice rose. After I spent all night helping you save this deal? After I created a solution that protects everyone involved. After you gained access to information that could be worth millions to our competitors, Kevin said quietly. The betrayal hit Tasha like a physical blow. These men who had grudgingly come to respect her work were now looking at her like she was a criminal. Harrison, she said, turning to the one person in the room who had seen her true self. You know I didn't do this. You know who I am. But Harrison's silence stretched like a chasm between them. She watched his face, seeing the internal war between the connection they'd built and the logical doubts Trevor was planting. Harrison began, then stopped. That hesitation destroyed something inside Tasha's chest. After everything they'd shared, every moment of vulnerability and trust, he was actually considering that she might have betrayed him. You don't believe me, she whispered. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Tasha's voice gained strength as anger began to override hurt. Either you trust me or you don't. Either the last 12 hours meant something, or they were an elaborate con game. Trevor seized the moment. Harry, we need to call security. Have her escorted out before she can access any more sensitive. Stop. The word came out like a gunshot. Harrison turned to his CFO with fury in his eyes. Nobody is calling security. But Harry, I said stop. Harrison's voice carried enough authority to make Trevor step back. Tasha, I need you to understand the position this puts us in. If this information leak came from our team. If. The word tasted like poison in Tasha's mouth. You actually think I sold you out? I think someone did. And the timing. The timing is convenient for whoever really leaked this information. They knew exactly when to release it for maximum damage. Tasha grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with anger and heartbreak. But it's easier to blame the outsider, isn't it? The waitress who couldn't possibly belong in your world. Tasha, that's not what It's exactly what you're saying. Tears of rage and betrayal burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these men who had already written her off. You were right last night, Harrison. Everything did change. I just didn't realize it would change back so quickly. Harrison reached for her, but she stepped away from his touch like it burned. Don't touch me after looking at me like I'm a criminal. Tasha's voice cracked despite her efforts to stay strong. I thought you were different. I thought you saw something in me that others missed. But you're just like everyone else. The moment things get complicated, you believe the worst. That's not fair. Fair. Tasha's laugh was bitter. Nothing about this is fair. I saved your company, Harrison. I spent all night creating solutions that will make you millions. And the moment someone suggests I might not be worthy of trust, you throw it all away. Trevor stepped forward. Ms. Bennett, if you'll just cooperate with our investigation. There's nothing to investigate. Tasha looked around the room at faces that had transformed from respect to suspicion in the span of minutes. I didn't leak anything to anyone. But I'm not staying here to be treated like a corporate spy. She headed for the door, then turned back one last time. You want to know who I really am, Harrison? I'm someone who believed in fairy tales. Someone stupid enough to think that one night of connection could overcome a lifetime of being overlooked and dismissed. Someone who thought you were brave enough to trust what we built together. Tasha, wait. No. I'm done waiting. I've spent 4 years waiting for someone to give me a chance, and when you did, I thought it meant something. But chances don't mean anything if they can be taken away the moment it becomes inconvenient. She walked toward the elevator, each step feeling like she was leaving pieces of herself behind. Behind her, she could hear heated voices, Harrison arguing with Trevor, accusations and defenses flying back and forth. But it was too late. The damage was done. The elevator doors opened, and Tasha stepped inside. As they closed, she caught one last glimpse of Harrison standing in the conference room doorway, his face a mask of conflict and regret. 22 floors down, Tasha walked out of One Boston Place and into the morning rush hour crowd. Around her, the city bustled with people heading to jobs where they belonged, where they were valued, where they didn't have to prove their worth every 12 hours. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. Please don't leave. We need to talk. Tasha deleted the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. Some trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired. And some fairy tales, no matter how beautiful, were just stories that ended when the sun came up. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. Mom, it's over. The whole thing is over. Dr. Helen Bennett's voice was gentle but firm. Come home, baby girl. Come home and tell me everything. As Tasha walked through the streets of Boston, heading back to her small apartment and smaller dreams, she tried not to think about a conference room where she danced and kissed and believed in possibilities that had crumbled at the first sign of doubt. Behind her, in a tower of glass and steel, Harrison Montgomery stood at his window watching her disappear into the crowd, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Harrison stood alone in his office, staring at the acquisition documents scattered across his desk. The meeting with the target company had been postponed indefinitely. The news leak had poisoned the well, making any deal impossible until the source could be identified and trust rebuilt. 6 months of work, millions in preparation costs, and his company's reputation hung in limbo. But none of that mattered as much as the empty chair at his conference table where Tasha had sat just hours ago, creating financial miracles with the same hands that had trembled when she'd asked if he believed her. Trevor knocked and entered without waiting for permission. The PR team wants to release a statement denying the allegations in the article. Which allegations? Harrison's voice was flat. That we're incompetent. That we missed basic accounting errors. That our due diligence process is flawed. All of which are true. Trevor paused. Harry, We need to control the narrative here.
The narrative?
Harrison turned from the window, his green eyes cold. The narrative is that we nearly threw away $356 million because we were too arrogant to double-check our work. The narrative is that it took a woman working in a restaurant to save us from our own stupidity. A woman who may have sold that information to competitors. Based on what evidence, Trevor?
The timing?
Her financial situation. Harrison's voice rose. By that logic, half our employees are potential security risks. Trevor set a folder on Harrison's desk. I had our security firm run a preliminary investigation. There's more you need to know. Harrison stared at the folder like it might bite him. What more? Tasha Bennett's background. She didn't just graduate magna cum laude from Boston University. She was recruited by 3 major accounting firms during her senior year. Goldman Sachs offered her a position in their mergers and acquisitions division. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. What happened? The recession hit her graduation month. All 3 offers were rescinded. She's been trying to break back into finance ever since. Trevor's voice softened slightly. Harry, she's not some amateur who got lucky. She's exactly what she appeared to be, a brilliant analyst who's been systematically shut out of the industry. Harrison sank into his chair, the weight of realization crushing down on him. You're telling me she was qualified all along? Overqualified. Her professors still remember her. Dr. Williams at BU said she was the most naturally gifted financial analyst he'd taught in 20 years. Then why did you? Because I was protecting you. Because the last time you trusted someone completely, she nearly destroyed everything we'd built. Trevor sat across from Harrison's desk. But I was wrong, Harry. The leak didn't come from her. Harrison's head snapped up. How do you know? Because I found the real source. Derek Walsh has been feeding information to Blackstone Capital for the past 6 months. Phone records, email timestamps, bank deposits. We have everything. The revelation hit Harrison like a sledgehammer. Derek. His head of acquisitions. Someone he'd trusted with the most sensitive deals. Someone who had sat in that conference room and watched Tasha be destroyed while knowing he was the real traitor. 6 months. Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe longer. He's been passing along details of our target companies, allowing Blackstone to swoop in with competing offers. This acquisition wasn't his first betrayal, just his most lucrative. Harrison thought about Derek's skeptical questions, his dismissive attitude toward Tasha, his eager participation in the witch hunt that morning. The man had watched an innocent woman be torn apart and said nothing. Where is he now? Security escorted him out an hour ago. His computers have been seized, his access revoked. Our legal team is preparing criminal charges. Harrison stared at the folder containing proof of Derek's betrayal, but all he could see was Tasha's face when she'd asked if he believed her. The hurt in her eyes when he'd hesitated. The dignity with which she'd walked away after he'd failed the most important test of his life. I destroyed everything, didn't I? Trevor was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. But maybe not. The question is what you're going to do about it. Harrison looked at his phone, where 6 unanswered text messages to Tasha showed as delivered but unread. She won't talk to me. I wouldn't either, in her position. Then don't talk. Act. What do you mean? Trevor pulled out his own phone, scrolling through news websites. The story about our acquisition problems is everywhere. Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, all painting us as incompetent fools who nearly made a massive error. Your point. My point is that the real story, the story of how a brilliant analyst saved us from disaster, that story hasn't been told yet. Harrison stared at his oldest friend, understanding dawning in his eyes. Trevor. Call a press conference. Tell the truth. All of it. How Tasha identified the errors, how she created the solution, how she saved the company. Make her the hero she actually is. She'll hate the attention. She's not interested in publicity. She's not interested in being invisible anymore either. Give her credit, Harry. Give her the recognition she's earned. Show the world what you should have shown her this morning, that you believe in her completely. The idea terrified and exhilarated Harrison in equal measure. A press conference would make Tasha's role public, but it would also expose her to scrutiny she might not want. It was a risk, but everything worthwhile involved risk. What if she still won't forgive me? Then at least she'll know you tried to make it right. Across the city, Tasha sat in her small apartment, staring at her laptop screen. The Morrison & Associates website was open, showing a job posting for a junior accountant position, entry-level, barely above minimum wage, requiring 3 years of recent experience she didn't have. Her phone buzzed with another message from Harrison. She'd stopped reading them after the third one, but she could see the preview text. Tasha, please give me a chance to explain. She deleted it without opening it. The knock on her door was gentle but persistent. Tasha ignored it, assuming it was her landlord asking about the rent that would be late again. But the voice that called through the door made her freeze. Tasha, it's B. From the restaurant. Can we talk? Tasha opened the door to find Beatrice Walker holding a bag of takeout food and wearing an expression of motherly concern. Honey, you look like hell, B said, pushing past Tasha into the small apartment. When's the last time you ate something? I'm fine, B. You don't need to. Sit down and talk to me. BEA's voice carried the authority of someone who'd been taking care of people for decades. Frank told me what happened yesterday. The whole restaurant is buzzing about you helping some billionaire with his business problems. Tasha sank onto her small couch. It's over. The whole thing was a mistake. Was it? Because Frank got a call this morning from someone claiming to be Mr. Montgomery's assistant. They wanted to know if you were scheduled to work today. Why would? Because maybe he's not as ready to give up as you think. B sat beside Tasha, opening the takeout containers. Tell me what really happened. For the next hour, Tasha told B everything. The financial discovery, the job offer, the night of collaboration, the growing connection with Harrison, and the devastating accusations that had torn it all apart. So let me get this straight, B said when Tasha finished. This man offered you a job based on your skills, spent all night working with you as an equal, opened up about his personal life, and kissed you like he meant it? Yes, but... And then when his business partner accused you of corporate espionage, he hesitated to defend you? He didn't believe me, B. When it mattered most, he chose to doubt instead of trust. B was quiet for a moment, considering. Honey, can I tell you something about men? Especially men who've been hurt before. Tasha nodded. They panic. When something good happens too fast, when they start to feel too much, their first instinct is to protect themselves. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. So I should just forgive him? Pretend it didn't happen? I'm saying maybe you should ask yourself what you really want. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Before Tasha could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's number. Tasha, baby, turn on channel 5. Right now. Mom, what? Just turn it on. Trust me. Tasha grabbed her remote, switching to the local news station. A reporter stood outside One Boston Place, speaking into a microphone while behind her, through the building's glass lobby, camera flashes suggested some kind of press event. Unprecedented press conference where Montgomery Ventures CEO Harrison Montgomery publicly credited an unnamed financial analyst with saving his company from what he called the biggest mistake in our corporate history. Montgomery stated that this analyst, who he described as brilliant beyond measure, identified accounting errors that could have cost the company over $300 million. Tasha's phone slipped from her nerveless fingers. On screen, Harrison appeared at a podium, his face serious but his voice clear and strong. The analyst who saved our company is someone who has been systematically overlooked by this industry despite extraordinary qualifications. Today, I want to set the record straight and publicly acknowledge her contributions. Her name is Tasha Bennett, and she represents everything this industry should value: integrity, insight, and the courage to speak truth to power. The camera zoomed in on Harrison's face as he continued. Ms. Bennett, if you're watching this, I want you to know that I believe in you completely. I should have said that this morning when it mattered. I should have trusted what I knew in my heart to be true. I failed you when you needed me most, and I'm sorry." Tasha stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face as Harrison continued speaking about her qualifications, her insights, and the debt restructuring solution she'd created. He was giving her credit for everything, holding nothing back, exposing himself to scrutiny to restore her reputation. "The job offer I made to Ms. Bennett stands," Harrison concluded. "Not because of what she did for our company, but because of who she is. Any organization would be lucky to have someone with her combination of analytical brilliance and unwavering integrity." The news cut to commercial, leaving Tasha sitting in stunned silence. "Well," B said softly, "I'd say that man just chose trust over doubt." Tasha's phone buzzed with a new message from Harrison. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that everything I said was true. You saved more than my company, Tasha. You saved me. The choice is yours now." Tasha stared at the message, her heart racing with possibility and fear in equal measure. Outside her window, Boston hummed with life and second chances. Inside her small apartment, a woman who had been invisible for 4 years held the power to choose her own future. The question was, would she be brave enough to choose love? Tasha stood outside the Beacon Hill Bistro, watching the morning rush of customers through the window. 24 hours ago, she'd been serving coffee to people who barely saw her. Now, thanks to Harrison's press conference, 3 major accounting firms had called her mother's house looking for her contact information. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was finally visible, but the man who'd made it possible was the one person she couldn't bring herself to face. Frank DeLuca spotted her through the window and emerged from the restaurant, his face splitting into a grin. "Tasha Bennett, financial genius and local celebrity," he said, wrapping her in an unexpected hug. "I always knew you were destined for bigger things." "Did you really?" "Okay, I suspected. But I definitely knew you were too smart for this place." Frank's expression grew serious. "I heard about what happened yesterday. The accusations, the press conference. That took courage, what Mr. Montgomery did." "Courage or damage control? Honey, I've been in this business 40 years. I know the difference between a man trying to save face and a man trying to save something he cares about." Frank squeezed her shoulder. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Tasha could answer, a familiar voice made her turn around. "I thought I might find you here." Harrison Montgomery stood on the sidewalk, looking nothing like the polished billionaire from their first meeting. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his green eyes that suggested he'd slept even less than she had. "Mr. Montgomery," Frank said with obvious respect. "Good to see you again. Please, call me Harrison. And thank you for taking such good care of Tasha. She's lucky to have people who recognize her worth." Frank looked between them, reading the tension and possibility crackling in the air. "I'll leave you two to talk. Tasha, you know you're always welcome here, but something tells me you're meant for much bigger stages." After Frank disappeared back into the restaurant, Tasha and Harrison stood facing each other on the busy sidewalk. Morning commuters flowed around them like water around stones, but they might as well have been alone in the universe. "I saw the press conference," Tasha said quietly. "I hoped you would. I wanted the whole world to know what you did for my company. What you are. And what am I, Harrison?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his tired eyes. "You're brilliant. You're brave. You're kind enough to save a stranger from financial disaster and strong enough to walk away when that stranger failed to protect you. You didn't just fail to protect me. You doubted me. I know." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I let my past poison what we were building. I'm sorry I chose fear over faith when it mattered most." Tasha studied his face, seeing the genuine remorse there. "Trevor told you about Derek. Derek, the background checks, your qualifications. All of it. But I should have known without proof. I should have trusted what I felt here." Harrison pressed his hand to his chest. "What I still feel. Which is that you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. That 24 hours ago I was a man going through the motions of living, and now I can't imagine my life without you in it." The words hung between them like a bridge. Tasha felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack under the weight of his sincerity. "Harrison, marry me." The words came out in a rush, shocking them both. Harrison looked as surprised as Tasha felt, but he didn't take it back. "What did you just say?" "I said marry me. I know it's crazy. I know we've known each other for 36 hours. I know I have no right to ask after what I put you through yesterday." "Then why are you asking?" Harrison reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Because sometimes 36 hours is enough to know. Because I don't want to waste another day wondering what could have been. Because you make me want to be the man you believed I was when you danced for me in my conference room." He opened the box, revealing a simple but stunning diamond ring that caught the morning light like captured starfire. "Because I love you, Tasha Bennett. I love your mind, your heart, your integrity, your courage. I love the way you see possibilities where others see problems. I love how you make me want to be brave enough to deserve you." Tasha stared at the ring, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're insane. This is insane. Completely insane," Harrison agreed. "But the sanest thing I've ever wanted to do. We barely know each other. We know the things that matter. We know how we work together under pressure. We know we trust each other with our deepest fears and biggest dreams. We know that what we felt in that conference room was real." Tasha thought about the past 4 years, the rejections, the disappointments, the slow erosion of hope. Then she thought about the past 2 days, the recognition, the respect, the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in her adult life. What about the job? The company? Keep the job if you want it. Start your own firm if you prefer. Join a competitor to spite me. I don't care about any of that. Harrison's voice was fierce with conviction. I care about you. I care about us. Everything else is just details. A crowd was beginning to gather on the sidewalk, people recognizing Harrison from the news coverage and whispering among themselves. Tasha became aware they were creating a scene, but somehow that didn't matter anymore. You hurt me, she said quietly. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it never happens again. How can you promise that? How can anyone promise that? I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never stop fighting for us. I can promise I'll never stop believing in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. Tasha looked at the ring, then at Harrison's face, then at the restaurant window where Frank and Bea were watching with undisguised hope. My mother will want to interrogate you, she said. Hope flickered in Harrison's eyes. I'm looking forward to it. She'll ask about your 5-year plan, your intentions, your feelings about public education funding. I'll answer honestly. She'll probably make you help her grade papers. I'd be honored. Tasha felt tears beginning to blur her vision. This is crazy, Harrison. Absolutely, completely crazy. The best things usually are. She looked at him, really looked, seeing past the wealth and power to the man who had been broken by betrayal and rebuilt himself through sheer determination. The man who had recognized her worth when no one else would. The man who had risked his reputation to restore hers. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to the crazy, impossible, beautiful insanity of it all. Harrison's face transformed, joy replacing the careful hope he'd been holding. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her with 4 years of loneliness and 2 days of recognition and a lifetime of possibility. The crowd on the sidewalk broke into spontaneous applause. Car horns honked. Someone shouted, "Congratulations!" from across the street. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tasha laughed through her tears. So what happens now? Now we go save that acquisition deal. Together. Together. As partners. Equal partners. In business and everything else. 3 hours later, Tasha sat across from the Target Company's board of directors, Harrison beside her, as they presented the debt restructuring proposal she'd created. The documents were the same ones they'd worked on 2 nights ago, but everything else had changed. Ms. Bennett, the Target Company's CEO said after reviewing the terms, "This is the most thoughtful approach to distressed financing I've seen in 20 years of business. You've created a pathway that protects everyone involved while incentivizing genuine operational improvement." "Thank you," Tasha replied, her voice steady with confidence she was still learning to trust. The key is aligning interests rather than simply transferring risk. The deal was signed that afternoon. The Target Company got the financing they needed to address their compliance issues. Montgomery Ventures got a valuable asset at a fair price with built-in protections. And Tasha Bennett got something she'd been searching for her entire adult life: recognition for her true abilities. That evening, they sat in Harrison's office as the sun set over Boston Harbor. The acquisition documents were filed, the press had gotten their story of financial genius and romantic proposal, and the rest of the world had faded into background noise. "Any regrets?" Harrison asked, watching Tasha admire her engagement ring in the golden light. "About which part? The proposal, the deal, or walking away from my career as a waitress?" "Any of it. All of it." Tasha considered the question seriously. "I regret that it took 4 years to get here. I regret all the time we lost before we found each other. But this," she gestured to the space between them, to the documents representing their first successful collaboration, to the future spreading out before them like an uncharted map, "this I don't regret at all." Harrison reached across the table and took her hand. "What would you tell your mother now? About dreams and possibilities and what happens when someone finally sees your worth?" "I'd tell her that sometimes fairy tales are real. Sometimes the universe conspires to put you exactly where you need to be, even when you can't see the path." Tasha smiled, remembering the morning just 3 days ago when she dreaded another day of invisibility. And sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to say, "Line 47, to change everything." Harrison brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her ring finger. "Line 47, he repeated softly. "The detail that saved everything." Outside the windows, Boston sparkled in the twilight. In the distance, they could see the Beacon Hill Bistro where a small accounting error had led to extraordinary love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new deals to structure, new problems to solve. But tonight, 2 people who had found each other across impossible odds sat together in the gathering darkness, holding tight to the most valuable thing of all: a love that had been tested and chosen and proven real. Some stories end with grand gestures and dramatic revelations. Others end with a quiet recognition that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest details. A glance at the wrong document. A moment of courage in speaking up. A willingness to see worth where others see only service. In the end, Tasha Bennett saved more than $356 million. She saved a company, a deal, and a man who had forgotten how to trust. But most importantly, she saved herself, from invisibility, from self-doubt, from a life lived smaller than her dreams. And Harrison Montgomery learned that the greatest acquisitions aren't companies or assets, but connections that transform everything they touch. Together, they discovered that love, like accounting, is all about balance. And when you find the right person to balance the books of your heart, every calculation adds up to something beautiful. 1 year later, the bronze nameplate on the office door read, "Tasha Bennett Montgomery, Senior Partner," in elegant script. Inside the corner office of Montgomery Ventures, now expanded to occupy 2 full floors of One Boston Place, Tasha reviewed quarterly reports that showed record profits and successful completions of 12 major acquisitions, all structured using variations of the debt restructuring model she'd pioneered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. "Ready for tonight? Mom's making her famous pot roast." Tasha smiled, typing back, "Your mother or mine?" "Both. They're cooking together again. I fear for our digestive systems." The friendship between Dr. Helen Bennett and Harrison's mother, Patricia Montgomery, had been unexpected but delightful. Both women were retired educators with strong opinions about everything from politics to proper seasoning techniques. Their weekly dinner gatherings had become legendary among friends and family. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Trevor Hayes entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a grin that suggested excellent news. "The Henderson acquisition just closed," he announced. "Clean books, no hidden liabilities, exactly as your analysis predicted. That's 12 for 12 this year, Tasha. We've gotten better at spotting the red flags, Tasha replied, but she was pleased. Each successful deal validated the analytical framework she developed, proving that careful attention to detail could prevent the kind of disaster they'd narrowly avoided a year ago. There's something else, Trevor continued. Harvard Business School called. They want you to guest lecture in their mergers and acquisitions program. Something about innovative approaches to distressed asset evaluation. Tasha felt a familiar flutter of imposter syndrome, quickly suppressed by the confidence that had grown over 12 months of proven success.
When? Next month. And Tasha?
They're also interested in publishing your debt restructuring methodology as a case study. The Bennett model, they're calling it. Before Tasha could respond, Harrison appeared in the doorway, early for their lunch meeting. At 43, marriage had softened some of his harder edges while amplifying his natural confidence. Success agreed with him, but more than that, happiness agreed with him. Are we celebrating something? He asked, noting the champagne. Your wife just became an even bigger star in the academic world, Trevor replied. Harvard wants to immortalize her brilliance in business school curricula. Harrison's smile was pure pride. As they should. Though I could have told him a year ago that Tasha Bennett was going to revolutionize corporate finance. Tasha Bennett Montgomery, she corrected automatically, still feeling a small thrill at the hyphenated name. Never letting me forget I won the lottery, Harrison said, crossing to kiss her cheek. Trevor cleared his throat diplomatically. I'll leave you two to discuss Harvard over lunch. But Tasha, think seriously about the teaching opportunity. Students need to hear from practitioners who've actually solved real-world problems. After Trevor left, Harrison settled into the chair across from Tasha's desk, the same configuration they'd used during that first all-night collaboration. So, Professor Bennett Montgomery, Harrison said, how does it feel to be academia's newest celebrity? Terrifying and exciting in equal measure. Like everything else this year. Harrison laughed. Speaking of terrifying and exciting, I have news too. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. Derek Walsh's trial concluded yesterday. Guilty on all counts of corporate espionage and fraud. 15 years federal prison, full restitution ordered. Tasha felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. Derek's betrayal had nearly destroyed her reputation and Harrison's company, but seeing anyone's life completely unravel was still sobering. What about Blackstone? She asked. Forced to dissolve their ill-gotten acquisitions, pay massive fines, and restructure their entire operations under federal oversight. 3 executives are facing criminal charges. The industry has taken notice. Corporate espionage is being prosecuted much more aggressively now. Good. Maybe that will make other companies think twice. Harrison reached across the desk to take her hand, his thumb automatically finding her wedding ring. The simple platinum band sat beside her engagement ring, both symbols of promises kept and trust rebuilt. Any regrets? He asked, echoing the question he'd posed a year ago. About which part? The marriage, the career, or leaving my illustrious waitressing position? Any of it. All of it. Tasha considered the question, looking around her office with its view of Boston Harbor, walls lined with framed deal announcements, and photos from their small wedding ceremony 6 months earlier. Dr. Helen Bennett beamed from every picture, radiating the pride of a mother whose faith had been vindicated. I regret that Frank had to hire 3 people to replace me at the restaurant, she said with mock seriousness. Apparently, I was irreplaceable in the coffee pouring department. Frank's doing fine. He's actually implementing some of your inventory management suggestions. Profits are up 20%.
And B.
Promoted to general manager. She sends her love and wants to know when we're having babies so she can spoil them properly. Tasha felt heat rise in her cheeks. The baby question had been coming up more frequently from both their mothers, though she and Harrison had agreed to focus on building their partnership, both personal and professional, before expanding their family. What did you tell her? That we're still perfecting the art of being married before we tackle parenthood. Though I may have mentioned that Dr. Bennett has very strong opinions about the educational advantages of early childhood music exposure.
You didn't.
I may have accidentally started a conversation about which preschools have the best programs for gifted children. Your mother and mine spent 2 hours researching violin teachers yesterday. Tasha groaned. We're never going to escape the grandmother conspiracy. Could be worse. They could be pressuring us about grandchildren instead of just discussing hypothetical educational plans for theoretical babies. Their comfortable banter was interrupted by another knock. Jennifer Cole, the legal counsel who had worked through that first crucial night, entered with a thick folder. Sorry to interrupt, but we need signatures on the Patterson deal documents. Final closing is Monday morning. As Tasha reviewed and signed the papers, Jennifer smiled. You know, a year ago I never would have predicted that the biggest disruption to our industry would come from someone who started as a restaurant server. The biggest disruption has been remembering that talent exists everywhere, Tasha replied. We just have to be willing to see it. After Jennifer left, Harrison and Tasha gathered their coats for lunch. As they waited for the elevator, Harrison pulled out his phone to show her a news alert. Morrison and Associates filed for bankruptcy this morning, he said. Apparently, Patricia Morrison's conservative approach couldn't compete with firms that were willing to embrace innovative thinking. Tasha felt a pang of sympathy for the woman who had rejected her so decisively a year ago, but it was tempered by the recognition that sometimes institutions had to fail to make room for better approaches. Should I feel guilty about that? You should feel proud that you're part of the solution instead of part of the problem. The elevator doors opened, revealing the same security guard who had directed Tasha to Harrison's office that first evening. His face lit up when he saw them. Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, how are the newlyweds doing? Very well, Carlos. How's your daughter's accounting program at Northeastern? She loves it. Keeps talking about some case study they're reading about innovative debt restructuring. Apparently, it's required reading now in all the finance programs. Tasha and Harrison exchanged amused glances. The Bennett model was gaining more recognition than either of them had anticipated. Tell her to keep working hard, Tasha said. The industry needs fresh perspectives and critical thinking. Will do, Mrs. Montgomery. And congratulations again on the Harvard invitation. My daughter is so excited that someone from Boston is making such a big impact. As they walked toward the restaurant where they'd first met, now a weekly tradition, Tasha reflected on how much had changed since that November afternoon when she'd been dreading another day of invisibility. Harrison, she said as they approached the Beacon Hill Bistro, can I ask you something? Anything. That first day, when you offered me the job, were you really that confident in my abilities, or were you taking a massive gamble? Harrison stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of complete seriousness. I was terrified, he admitted. But not because I doubted your abilities. I was terrified because I recognized something in you that I'd been missing in my own life. Which was authenticity, integrity, the willingness to do the right thing even when it's difficult. He cupped her face gently. I fell in love with your mind first, Tasha, but I fell in love with your character even faster. Inside the restaurant, Frank greeted them like the celebrities they'd become in the local business community. Their usual table, the same booth where Harrison had nearly signed away $356 million, was waiting with a small placard that read, "Reserved for the Montgomerys." The usual? Frank asked with a knowing smile. Actually, Tasha said, I think I'll have something different today. Something I've never tried before. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Feeling adventurous? Always, Tasha replied, squeezing his hand across the table. After all, the best opportunities usually come disguised as ordinary moments. As they settled into their booth, Tasha looked around the restaurant where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the place where a simple observation about line 47 had changed everything. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. Saw the Harvard announcement on the news. So proud of my brilliant daughter. Dad would have been over the moon. Tasha felt tears prick her eyes at the mention of her father, who had passed away during her college years but had always believed in the power of education to transform lives. Good news? Harrison asked, noticing her expression. The best news, Tasha replied. The reminder that everything we build is standing on the foundation of people who believed in us before we knew how to believe in ourselves. Outside the restaurant windows, Boston hummed with its eternal energy of ambition and possibility. Inside, two people who had found extraordinary love in the most ordinary circumstances sat together, planning a future that would honor both their individual talents and their shared commitment to seeing worth where others saw only surface. The story that had begun with a small detail noticed by sharp eyes and a brave voice had evolved into something larger. A partnership that was changing an industry, a love that was reshaping two lives, and a reminder that recognition and respect are the most powerful forces for transformation in the world. Some fairy tales end with, happily ever after. But the best ones end with, and this is just the beginning. Because when two people find each other across impossible odds and choose to build something beautiful together, every day becomes a new chapter in a story that keeps getting better. Line 47 had saved $356 million. But more importantly, it had saved two hearts that had almost given up on the possibility of being truly seen. And that, it turned out, was priceless. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.